Let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Meredith Taylor, and I'm the Community Relations Manager for CityCurrent. Thank you for joining me for our Be Well webinar featuring Centerstone, the nation's largest not-for-profit community behavioral health provider. Today, I'm joined by CityCurrent's Director of Digital Media, Andrew Bartolotta, who will be taking your questions throughout the webinar to be asked during our Q&A session at the end. So be sure to type in those questions in the chat box provided. We are also joined by our special guests from Centerstone, Rebecca Davis, Becky Stoll, and Dr. Banks. Becky Stoll and Dr. Banks will be presenting on how to maintain your mental health and well-being while supporting those around you during this time. They will also share what Centerstone is doing to adapt and care for the more than 150,000 clients they serve across the country via telehealth. I'm going to start us off with introducing Becky and Dr. Banks, and then turn it over to them to lead us in how to navigate the new normal during this time. Becky Stoll serves as Vice President for Crisis and Disaster Management for Centerstone. In this role, Stoll oversees the continuum of Centerstone's crisis services, including the 24-hour crisis call center, mobile crisis response teams, as well as Centerstone's crisis management strategies, which is a public and private sector crisis preparedness and response service. Stoll, a respected industry leader in suicide prevention and crisis services, serves as a faculty member for the Suicide Prevention Resource Center's Zero Suicide and Health and Behavioral Health Care Academies across the U.S., steering committee member of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and member of the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention's Clinical Task Force. Additionally, she has presented at the White House briefing on building partnerships for suicide prevention and presented at international gatherings of organizations committed to zero suicide and health and behavioral health care in Oxford, England, Vancouver, Canada, Sydney, Australia, and Rotterdam, Netherlands. In addition to her work at Centerstone, Stoll represents the organization on a national and international scale through her roles as Board Chair Emeritus and faculty member for the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. She also serves as mental health faculty for the American Red Cross, clinical director for the Nashville Fire Department's Critical Incident Stress Management Team, chair for the State Disaster Mental Health Response Committee, and consultant and trainer for the Airline Pilots Association, the Association of Flight Attendants, and U.S. Airways. Stoll has been with Centerstone for 19 years and previously served as Director of Crisis Services and Crisis Management Strategies. She holds a bachelor's degree from Tennessee State University and a master's in social work from the University of Tennessee. We are also fortunate to be joined by Dr. Bree Banks. Dr. Banks is the Director of Clinical Education at Centerstone's Research Institute. In this work, Dr. Banks leads the strategic design, direction, implementation, and research and evaluation of clinical education initiatives across Centerstone's enterprise. Out of her dedication to innovation and the delivery of high-quality care to patients who need it most, she is currently spearheading the development of the nation's first community-based simulation training center for behavioral health. Spurred from her doctoral dissertation work, which examined counselors' simulated behavioral response to patients at risk for suicide, Dr. Banks is an emerging leader in the development and advocacy for simulation-based education for behavioral health providers. Dr. Banks holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Political Science, a Master of Arts in Clinical Health Counseling, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Counselor Education and Supervision from the University of Tennessee. She has over 10 years of experience as a behavioral health translational scientist and clinician, having served in both leading and supporting roles in federal grant awards totaling over $19 million. Her research and clinical expertise lies primarily with suicide prevention and intervention, including the development and implementation of cross-cultural treatment and simulation training for suicide-specific evidence-based psychotherapies. Dr. Banks has also held several academic appointments in counseling and counselor education master's and doctoral programs. So without further ado, thank you so much, Becky and Dr. Banks, for joining us this morning. I'll let you two take it from here.
Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. This is Becky Stoll coming to you from my front room in my house here in Nashville, Tennessee. And Bree and I have been fortunate to present a lot prior to COVID and gotten to tag team a lot of these, and now we've done several since everything's gone virtual. So I told her she's the Starsky to my Hutch. And for those of you that are too young, that was a TV show back in the 70s and 80s. Look it up. So we want to talk to you all about really the mental health and emotional piece of all of this, which you see a lot about in the media, and want to talk about, what we have seen on the front lines that are helpful, not only during this event, but I think the experience we've had working in disaster situations that I think are very applicable to this situation, even with the magnitude that we're seeing. So Rebecca's going to advance slides for us, and Rebecca, you can go to the next. So we're going to talk a little bit, you all can see this, I won't read it, but really talking about the stress that this event's having, talking some about suicide prevention and support seeking, and then Bree's going to take over and talk about telehealth and how we transitioned and what we've learned as we have moved our operations to a virtual platform. Which I think we both would have told you back in February, there's no way we could have done what we did in the amount of time that we did, because we're like as this large ocean liner in the ocean, and it's hard to be nimble when you're that big. But to me, it was really astounding what we were able to do. Rebecca, you can advance. So the first thing when people have asked me about the state of mental health and wellness for individuals, I always like to start with this. We have to remember that everyone that's experiencing this event did not start out as the happiest, wealthiest, friendliest, most emotionally sound people. Everybody had their stuff going on in their lives. And people were at varying levels of stress before this started. And you see some of these on this list, people had their work life, and some people love and dig their work and other people don't. And so people had different, levels of stress related to whatever their work life was. They also have that in their home. People were going through divorces when this started. People had kids that are being naughty and not doing the things they're supposed to do and causing people stress. Financial issues were causing people stress. Those are external, work and home. And then people also as individuals had their own issues going on. People are battling, either chronic or situational physical health issues. And some people were also battling, even prior to this, depression and anxiety, or they had a substance issue, or using opioids in a way that was not good for them. So we have to remember, coming into this, not everyone was at their tip-top shape. So when you are considering yourself or considering other people around you, whether that's family or neighbors or colleagues, it's important to start. I think this is the real genesis of where we have to look at people's wellness, is how they were, what status they were in when they started. Rebecca? So I don't think there's a lack of information about how to take care of yourself. Google, even now with the COVID, there's not a lack of information about how can I lead a healthy and mentally sound life. But wellness is something you have to be purposeful about, and you have to make a decision that that's going to be important and you're going to do it. And it has to be woven into the ways in which you're living your life, which now are much more stunted and blunted because we can't go out to the Y. And so we have to figure out how to be physically healthy in what we have. But, I get asked a lot, what are 6 things people can do to work from home well? I think we know a lot of that stuff. It's being mindful to do it. Next slide, Rebecca. So what do we know? Well, it's pretty simple. What we should be doing, if you had been on about 5 minutes before we started at 10, you would have seen me eating my oats and chocolate Belvita bar. I was trying to be mindful to eat breakfast. That was something prior to all of this starting. To be honest, I never ate breakfast. I usually would get up, shower, get out of the house, do whatever. I usually could work at home a day or two, maybe a month. If it was a week, once a week, that was great. but I kind of revolved my schedule around just whatever I had going on. And I always skip breakfast. So I've tried to be a little bit more mindful to do that. And then really eating 3 meals a day. My staff were making fun of me because I mistakenly divulged to them I've been eating chicken noodle soup and a couple of saltine peanut butter crackers that I make every day. And they are telling me I'm on a nursing home diet. But, you know, I'm trying to be purposeful and eat lunch and eat dinner and try, you know, I'll say in the early days, it was really hard not to snack too much and eat the stuff that's super yummy, but I know is not good for me, whether that's donuts or ice cream sandwich, you know, stuff that made its way into the house when we thought the apocalypse was coming and I was just throwing stuff in the cart. And then that was here and it was really hard not to eat it. Getting good sleep, exercising, you know, and keeping your weight within healthy and normal limits. All of those stuff we know this. I'm not introducing things that have dropped your jaw, but this stuff takes purposefulness and really trying to do it every day. And then I think when we don't do it, I've been really encouraging people to give themselves some grace. This is hard to do. None of us are living the way that we're having to live right now. I think most people aren't. So if you do eat a donut and you don't exercise and you kind of fall off that wagon for a week, I think we have to cut ourselves some slack and try to get back into it as quickly as we can. Rebecca? So, you know, things we want to avoid, you know, self-medicating, you know, it's a little bit easier, I think, for folks who are having a hard time to drink or use medications that, you know, maybe were problematic before or not problematic, but maybe that's kind of ramped up. So we just want to make sure, you know, things like that are done in moderation so that people aren't spending too much of their time, you know, trying to deal with their stress in maladaptive ways, such as drinking and using things from a chemical standpoint that's not good for them, and avoid smoking and things like that. Rebecca? So what people can do, you know, I think you find activities and do what you enjoy. I play Madden football on my iPad. If you know me, Bree, you're not surprised by that, right? You would think that's pretty, yeah. So, but if you didn't know me, you wouldn't know that. And I'm not bragging, but I won a Super Bowl. So I'm going to put that on my CV now that I'm a reigning Super Bowl champ. But that's been good for me. So I've kind of worked during the day and kept my normal, you know, work hours, and then trying to wrap it up at a normal time. And then have dinner, and that's usually I'm an evening exerciser. Try to go walk and, you know, do those kind of things. But at night, I've been reading the news a little bit, trying to limit that. But also then I've played some soccer and some Madden football, and then read a little bit. So, you know, telling people what activities to do is not good. We can't be prescriptive about that. But I think people have to find those little niches that they can do and that they enjoy. My daughter has introduced me to Mario Kart. So we raced last night on her phone and my iPad. I don't understand it, and I didn't do very well, but it was fun. And, you know, it was a time. I have a 21-year-old at home who's, you know, home from college. And so we were able to do that. Things that are nice, like meditation and yoga, and things like that, are good. I just don't think these are things you can be super prescriptive about. Yoga is, you know, something I never thought I would like, but I have done it, continue to do it, and it's super relaxing and flexible. And, you know, when you get in your mid 50s, it helps your back a little bit, feeling better. And then I also think having some social time with folks that we're also having to be a little bit more purposeful about. I know people are having virtual happy hours with college friends. I have a colleague that went to a virtual costume party last week, which I thought was kind of cool. So we're just having to figure out ways to do this. Hopefully some of those social interactions, you know, at some point, and hopefully the not too distant future, might be in person, but from a distance, whether that's hiking or, grabbing lunch and sitting, 6 feet apart in a park and being able to connect that way. Because I think on the social side, it's been difficult for some people to be on Zoom all day and then Zoom with their parents out of town and then Zoom with their friend. You kind of get Zoom overload. And I do think it's okay for people to decide they just would choose not to look very nice that day. And when you got to get on your Zoom call, you just don't use the video. I surely have given myself, I didn't give myself permission the first couple of weeks, but I very quickly went, you know what, if today's a day that I don't feel like I have to present to people or large group and it's just internal, I am perfectly fine joining without video. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to do that. Rebecca, you can go next. So we have to make sure, especially during this time, we know connectedness is a really big deal in mental health wellness and especially suicide prevention, which we'll talk about in a second. But if there was ever a time to circle the wagons and make sure you have your tribe around you, it's now. And we know connectedness is a huge, huge piece of people's mental health wellness. And there's a variety of ways to get that. And I think now's the time that we have to be really thoughtful about including those folks and making sure that we're talking to people and connecting with them, whether that's text or videos or phone calls. And there's a variety of places to do that. Some people have more opportunity to connect with their support system or people that are in their lives, and some people don't. I'll tell you, I run a very large crisis call center. And sometimes when we try to help people with their support system, they have no one. And I mean, no one. And we become their connectedness. So if you're fortunate to have people in your lives that can help do that, I encourage you to think about, who on this list you could work with. Rebecca. So I'll tell you what I did to stay connected or to reconnect. Early on, it was super crazy. I was appointed to oversee our operations of the response for this in our very large multi-state footprint. And it was pretty overwhelming in that first couple of weeks. It was just extremely busy. That's when we were still doing things in person, trying to figure out how we were going to make sure everybody was safe. And then we looked at moving everybody virtually. So I decided one day I was going to just look and I said my Rolodex, and my 21-year-old had no idea what a Rolodex was. So I had to explain what that is. And if you don't know, type in the chat. I don't know what a Rolodex is, and because some of you guys are younger, because I know those are very obsolete now. But I went into the contacts of my phone and I just started with the letter A. And last name by A, and I just looked for people that I really am fond of or like or care about, and maybe I hadn't talked to them in a while, and I texted them. Some of them I had to email because that's all I had. And so I put it on my schedule, and I made that a daily activity I did until I cycled through the alphabet. And I'll tell you, I reconnected with a lot of people that I really enjoy and like, but I had not talked to them in a really long time just because life got in the way. And so it was really fun to connect with people. I think some people were surprised, during a pandemic, I had reached out to them because I'm not really close to them, but it was something for me that was kind of grounding, and it gave me some purpose. And it also had the extra effect of keeping me connected with people and catching up with those that I like. So feel free to do that. Don't do it. But just for me, it was something that I enjoyed doing, and I made it through the alphabet, and I'm going to give it a little bit of time. And I think I'm going to cycle through and touch back through and see folks again. Rebecca, next. So, excuse me, we have to prepare ourselves for, a return to, whatever this is going to look like. All the disasters we have worked, I'll tell you, this one is so different because everyone is going through it collectively. Most of the disasters we have ever worked, the people providing the service, the helpers, also did not go through the event. Now, we did have a flood here in Nashville in 2010, and lots of people were impacted, but not everybody on the helper side was impacted. But we have folks on call centers and mobile crisis teams and therapists and psychiatrists and nurse practitioners who are all providing service to individuals, but they're also going through the same thing and probably having a lot of the same feelings. So as we kind of prepare to go back and see a Memphis Grizzlies game or a Titans game or a Predators game, or, go see a play, or even just go to a movie, it's going to be different. And I think we're going to have to figure out this new normal. And normally new normals don't come at you so fast as these are. So I think we're in a new normal. We're probably going to cycle through several periods of new normal. And the thing that stinks about that is, it's like shaking up a snow globe. Most people don't enjoy a new normal, and we're going to cycle through it pretty quick. It's almost like we're in a road paved with Swiss cheese, and we're having to dodge those holes. And I think that's going to go on until, obviously this virus is not something that's so woven in to our presence right now, whether that's through a vaccine or treatment or testing or things like that. Rebecca, you can go next. So we really have to worry about this iceberg effect and build some stress resilience. We know that what we can see above the water is what we can see above the water, and that's what people want us to see. And that's often, physical health. I can see whether you look haggard or tired or super skinny because you've lost weight. It's really what's under the water that we should be worried about, which is emotional health. So we have to, and I encourage you, when you're talking to your friends, your employees, your colleagues, and yourself, to be mindful that there's a lot that lurks under the water. So we've got to build some stress resilience and some emotional fitness. Rebecca, you can go. So we need to allow ourselves times for relaxation. And again, I'll go back to the purposefulness. People need to figure out ways that, given what we're going through, they can unplug and do some things that they enjoy, whether that's at the end of a work day or on the weekends. The weekends are a little bit, I think, trickier. Remember when Friday night used to be exciting? And you were so excited it was Friday because you had the whole weekend ahead of you. I feel like now on Friday night, everybody's just kind of like, what's the weekend going to hold for us? Because it's going to look like Groundhog Day. It's going to look like every other day has looked. But finding times, whether that's you can get out and safely, go outside, or, I'm also okay with people giving themselves permission to lay on the couch for 8 hours and watch Tiger King. Like, that's okay too. It doesn't mean you got to, everybody's not going to come out of this all fit and in shape and super skinny and healthy. If your way of relaxing is watching the Michael Jordan, Chicago Bull documentary, I think that's okay. Or discovering, Seinfeld, or somebody told me they watched a bunch of Gilmore Girls. So I think, finding whatever suits you and it not being prescriptive is definitely a good thing. You can go next, Rebecca. So we look at some of these R's for managing wellness. And the first is taking responsibility. And this really is up to each individual person. I have to make kind of navigating this in a healthy way my responsibility. Nobody's going to do this for me. And I have to establish what my priorities and my goals are around that. And so I think that's the first challenge you have to take as an individual, is owning that you're going to manage this situation in the best way you can. That leads into really reflecting. So what is my stress level? How do I know when I'm becoming stressed out so that I can do something about it? I'll just tell you, last week I cried one day. Look, Bree, I just said it. I just was over it. And it was raining here in Nashville. It was super cloudy that day. And I was busy. I had a lot going on. And I kind of broke down a little bit and had some tears. And I knew that meant my stress level was ramped up. And I think that's okay. It was me kind of checking in on my life balance and knowing maybe that it was off kilter for me. And then trying to be cognizant of what I know I need to do to cycle myself out of that. Because personally, I don't tolerate feeling like that for a super long time. That's just not the way my personality is made out. So when it happened, I had to figure out, okay, what's going on and what can I do about that? And some of that was, this next bucket of, relaxing, doing something that I felt was enjoyable or entertaining, or giving myself permission to just kind of do nothing and flip to the TV and see Talladega Nights was on and just go, oh, I'll watch that again. I've seen it 10 times, but it's super funny, and, get myself out. We've kind of talked about relationships and pulling in your tribe. So make sure you do that, this refueling and this recreation. Feel free to share these R's of wellness with, if you have employees or you have a civic group or a church, because I think people really have to think about all 6 of these buckets that we have to make sure that we're coming out of this and managing this. So when things do settle down, either in this wave of the pandemic, or we cycle out of the pandemic at some point, that people are not so negatively impacted that they have some conditions that they would need to get treatment for. You can go to the next one. So some of the things, if you're an employer, or I'm assuming a lot of you are an employee, one thing I like to think about is the workplace focus. So hopefully where you work, and whether you're a supervisor or an employee, on the personal side, I think employers really do need to focus on mental health and wellness. And whether that's, I put a list of things here that I've seen be super helpful, and some of it's time off, taking your holidays. If your company has wellness resources, like they pay, gym memberships are kind of stuck right now because you can't do that. But, our company, we get a lot of deals through Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Hey, do you want to buy this Fitbit thing and it's super cheap? Or they'll pay and reimburse us for some, if you wanted to buy workout equipment, and you can get reimbursed for that. And then having employee assistance programs. And then when we all go, at some point, when people get back into the workplace, I have seen life benefits be helpful, whether that's having dry cleaning picked up at the office and returned, or, discounts on insurance, like car insurance or pet insurance, things like that. Any way that we can kind of look at benefits to make sure they're impactful for the employees, I think is a good thing. Next. And then the other is professional. What can we do for our employees outside of kind of benefits? And, having weekly decompression time during this pandemic, I think is a good thing. I talk to my staff at least weekly together to let them vent. And I started yesterday. Our company is having folks at my level of supervision. I'm calling some of the frontline staff that work in my umbrella. And so I talked to about 6 of my staff yesterday, and it was really nice to connect with them just, on a more personal level, and see personally how they were doing, and also see if they have everything they need for their job. And I got a lot of feedback last night from my direct reports where those staff had reached out to them and really appreciated that we had done that. We're doing that company-wide. So that was nice to connect with them, and I have a whole lot of more of them to call, and we'll do some of that today. Also having a landing spot with resources. We have one in our intranet. That's where Bree puts out a lot of stuff that she talks about, making sure that staff are training, fostering a fun environment. When my call center has meetings, you might see a cutout of Will Ferrell as Elf, or you might see an Elvis cutout because they're having a luau. In the office I work in, they have a foosball tournament, which I don't know how to play. So Bree, we should do that next year. I'll partner up. I don't know how to do it, but doing those kind of things for your staff, I think now in any way you can is a good thing, especially building out some time to let them kind of vent. You can go to the next one, Rebecca. Yeah, so this is some of our foosball. There's Elvis. They recognize everybody's birthdays. So I think in any way you can. My birthday was in April, and we have an afternoon call of our management team at 3 o'clock every day. When I logged on to that call on the day of my birthday, and I knew nobody knew it was my birthday that day, and we had been super busy because it was early on in the pandemic response, all of my colleagues had changed their background of the Zoom meeting to my headshot. So that was kind of, I was taken aback at first because there's just a lot of your own face looking back at you. But that was and so we've kind of carried that on. A couple of other people have had birthdays and just, little things to try to do to make it fun. Rebecca, you can go to the next. Very quickly on suicide prevention, because I want to get Bree on, know the trends in your profession. It's easy to go look, you can go to the CDC and see where your industry falls in what the trends in suicide are, and then offer some opportunities for your folks to understand because you're going to acknowledge and educate on this trend, that they understand what to look for, and really promoting help-seeking opportunities and how to access that. Rebecca, you can go to the next. So if you are suspicious that one of your staff might be having this issue, I did include some stuff here. They can either self-disclose, you're suspicious of it, another staff is suspicious, you might see a social media post. Sometime I just had, you can go to the next slide, Rebecca. I just had this happen last week where I was reached out to internally because somebody had seen some social media posts from one of our staff, and we were able to do some of this stuff right here. Is to look and make sure that somebody reached out to them. And we know good postvention is good prevention. So if you do have a staff suicide, you have to remember the family members that person left behind, customers as survivors. My primary care physician took her own life about 5 years ago. And it was really interesting about how I felt about that. It was really alarming. I was so shocked and devastated. And then we also have colleagues as survivors. So we have to remember those folks. Rebecca, you can go to the next. So we want to make sure when we do, if you guys were to experience that in your workplace, first, feel free to reach out to Bree and I, because we'd be glad to walk you through that. But communicate that well with the staff. And don't do what a company we responded to one time did, and they just put a note on the door as everybody came in, and it kind of just said, "Joe died, funerals Friday." That's not a good way to do that. You want to process that with the staff, and sometimes you might want to make that processing mandatory if in certain cases, so that you can monitor other people for high risk. Rebecca, you can go to the next. So Bree, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about seeking support in this new world we find us in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Becky. And thanks to all of you for giving Becky and Rebecca and I some of your time this morning. I have a frog in my throat, or that might just be my voice all the time. Who knows? So right now we're going to transition a little bit to talk about some of what we've experienced at Centerstone over the past several weeks in regard to just how COVID-19 really is transforming behavioral health as we know it, and the extent to which some of those changes might be permanent. And again, we don't know. We're all in this kind of perpetual state of ambiguity right now. And I think there is quite a bit of freedom in that. And so I'm going to move through a handful of things and talk a little bit about what telehealth is, the nature of telehealth, what Centerstone has done to kind of facilitate the transition to telehealth, and then talk a little bit about what the process has been like, because we've encountered what we've kind of deemed a parallel process. And so, as Becky mentioned, this is the first time we've gone through a crisis or a disaster event in which our clinicians and our staff and even ourselves are experiencing very, very, very similar things to those of our clients. And so we've noticed this parallel process that our clients are telling us, as well as our clinicians, and how we've been able to create not only a health delivery system, but a system in which our staff can work and thrive and maintain really the quality of care that we want to provide to our staff, but as well as that we want to provide to our clients, but to create an environment that our staff feel supported and able to do their best work. So when we think about telehealth, This is a term that we had been playing around with at Centerstone for a few years. We've heard it a little bit in the news and over the past couple of years, even outside of behavioral health, just this new opportunity to use this new milieu for healthcare delivery. But really over the past couple weeks, since COVID became COVID and our culture is a brand new place, we think that it's really quite likely that we're in the midst of a major transformation, not only in the world that we find ourselves living in, but in the healthcare system. One of the things that we've heard and noticed, and from our leadership really across just the healthcare sphere, is that it is very likely that we as an industry, as a healthcare industry or social service industry, and our peer industries, that will likely never go back to a normal the way that it was before. And so it's been an interesting, we're in an interesting vantage point really, to be examining while at the same time being in the midst of this major transformation of healthcare, of our clients' needs, of our clinicians' needs. But one of the unique strengths in that, one of the unique opportunities that we found is being in Centerstone and being as large as we are and seeing as many clients as we do. We've been able to navigate the transition oddly quickly. And I say oddly because I'm still in abject amazement of the way that we as an organization pulled together, the way our staff pulled together, and the way that even our clients have really come together to work with our clinicians to make sure that the healthcare system stays working the way that it should. You can go to the next slide, Rebecca. So before we kind of jump into some of the specifics and some of the process that we've had, this is a question that we've gotten from clients, that we've gotten from policymakers, that we've gotten from staff, really pretty significantly from staff, because there can be a sense of, and I'll be fully honest, whenever I was first introduced to telehealth, I had biases against it a little bit because I was trained really primarily as a therapist, and so much of what we do is in that kind of face-to-face space, and that one-on-one or one in a group format, to where we that's a bit of a sacred space, and we rely on body language and being together real time and being able to see one another and be present in a space. So there's some bias against telehealth in regard to whether or not it works, or if it works as well or in the same way as regular or traditional healthcare does. But what we found, both in exploring the existing research base, exploring the existing literature around telehealth, both in behavioral health and otherwise, as well as from our own research. We have in the Research Institute, we have a pretty large research and evaluation department that has had a finger on the pulse of our transition and are consistently gathering metrics and analytics around the successes and the barriers of this transition. And what we found is there really are some perks that go even above and beyond traditional healthcare in regard to accessing clients that we might not have traditionally had access to. But what the science tells us is that telehealth, whenever the delivery, whenever what is being delivered is still an evidence-based practice, is just as effective as face-to-face care delivery. And so being able to see that as a consistent theme in the scientific literature, and to see that present in some of our own data within Centerstone, again, because we're as large as we are, we're able to compile quite a bit of data relatively quickly. Being able to see that is really, for myself as a scientist and someone who's a huge advocate for evidence-based practice, that has been very comforting for me, but it's also been a rewarding and interesting experience in some of the trainings that we've done with clinicians to be able to share that we can work just as well, if not better, with clients via telehealth as we might in face-to-face, because again, kind of demystifying and destigmatizing some of this new process and creating some space to try out new things, but with the support of the science on our side is certainly reassuring for all of us. Go to the next slide, Rebecca. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we as an organization have been navigating the shift. And I say navigating because it is certainly a work in progress. We are, and some of our states and sites are at different places in this process than others, but we have been, I've been absolutely amazed out of the work that Becky's team has done and teams across our enterprise to really create infrastructure and to facilitate this transition to telehealth to make sure that all of our clients are still receiving high quality care and with the same amount, frequency, and quality that they're used to. And so after kind of thinking about what our processes look like, it really kind of fell into three core buckets, and one of which was establishing and building a new infrastructure for what telehealth needed to look like. And so within the Research Institute and our kind of organizations and clinics across our state business units, we had a few, not very many, I'd say 2 to 3 maybe, grant programs, like federal grant funded programs that had some telehealth components embedded into them. And so we weren't completely starting from scratch when we were thinking about how to take telehealth to a larger organization. However, there were several pretty key differences in those grant funded programs and where we are now, one of which was just size and scope. Our grant funded programs usually are, again, they're grants and they're usually research grants, so we keep them pretty small because we're usually piloting or testing a new intervention. So size was one issue. And another was time and place. And so for many of our telehealth programs that we had previously, we had on-site clinics that had a telehealth room inside the clinic to where clinicians were still in the clinic, but they could connect with clients that were at home. We're in a remote space. And so now, obviously, all of our clinicians, I'd say 95% of our clinicians, our workforce, are fully at home. The only ones that are still out in clinics are the ones that are absolutely required to be face-to-face, for example, injection clinics, things like that. And so we had to really quickly work with our IT department and other departments across the enterprise to facilitate and deliver software and hardware that made telehealth possible for we have about 3,500 clinicians across our footprint. And so making sure that they all had video, the video hardware and software, MiFis if they needed them for internet connectivity, things along those lines. One of the other things that Becky's team really led in collaboration with our public relations team, our communications, being able to be connected with staff in a variety of different strategies. So one of the things that we know from what's called implementation science is whenever we're trying to offer a new directive to a team or a new directive to a group of staff, that message coming from a newsletter is understood and taken quite differently than that message coming from their direct supervisor. And so creating these kind of stratified but concurrent dissemination strategies for getting information into the hands of our clinicians and our staff, and thereby our clients, was certainly a multifaceted and multidisciplinary lift that several of our departments really came together to build. And finally, protection. So one of the things that I've been really moved by and impressed by is our leadership's dedication to keeping our staff and our clients safe. And so while many of our states are going through or at least entering into phases of reopening, our leadership have stayed pretty hard and fast dedicated to keeping our staff physically safe and physically healthy. And so really leaning into telehealth and continuing to build out this infrastructure while we both internally and externally examine its efficacy and its effectiveness for our clients and clients outside of us as well. So this next pillar was really where myself and my team came in. And so being within the Research Institute, we were able, one of my primary goals or duties is really translating the science to practice. So what we've learned from evidence-based treatments and things that we read in scientific and academic journals, how do we take those findings but put them into real world practice? And there usually tends to be a pretty significant gap both in practice and in time between those two things. And so what my core role is in the Research Institute is leveraging education and training as a mechanism to translate the science to practice. And through my team and a colleague, Ashley Newton, and her team, we've been able to train approximately 2,000 clinicians, and we did so over about 2.5 weeks in the telehealth software and hardware, as well as best practices for telehealth and ways to engage our clients, ways to adapt existing evidence-based psychotherapies and practices to the telehealth environment. And so, and again, I want to say that I adhere to a lot of Becky's rules and guidelines around keeping ourselves safe and sane. But I am not going to lie to you guys. There was about those 2 weeks when I did not sleep as much as I should have and fueled myself pretty much on caffeine. But all of that in the spirit to make sure that our clinicians had what they needed in order to continue to provide high quality care for our clients. And one of the core things that we found that has been a very interesting space that's served quite a purpose for our clinicians is what we've called reflective practice groups. And what those are is they're led by me and my team, and they are similar to what Becky mentioned, just connecting with staff directly. But they're almost like an open forum, clinical supervision, like group process, space for clinicians to come and sit with us and experts like Becky and my CEO and other like experts across the enterprise to really just share with one another and with us what their experience has been like, what the barriers have been, what the victories have been, the problems that they've encountered and the solutions that they've come up with, and allowing them the space to share with one another, to share with us so that we can then take that to the larger organization. And to just have a space to come and be either at their best or at their worst. We've gotten quite a bit of really positive feedback about just providing that space. Creating a message to our clinicians and to our staff that we are all doing the very best we can with what we have. And that has been a bit of a mantra for us within my team over the past several weeks, and really promoting those reflective practice groups as a means to really kind of live that mission. And finally, both within my department, Becky's, the leadership across Centerstone as advocacy. So one of the things that we know really drives policy and can drive our advocacy efforts is data. We have quite a bit of anecdotal information about the telehealth process and the transition and things that have worked and things that haven't. But we know at the end of the day, people want to see numbers. They want to see how telehealth is effective. Does it reduce symptoms in the same ways that our traditional healthcare system and delivery processes might have? And so we've leveraged our research institute and our analytics departments to really lean into collecting some meaningful data and reporting on some really meaningful metrics for a variety of audiences, including payer boards, policymakers, and our clinicians on the front lines, making sure that clinicians know that what they're doing is working, and really promoting the sense that if this is the new normal, if it could be the new normal, these are the strategies that we need to leverage, and that Centerstone really has served as a national leader and can continue to serve as a national leader in that space. You can go to the next slide, Rebecca. So one of the interesting things that we've noticed, and I'll kind of run through these quickly to make sure we have time for questions and comments, is that our clinicians and our clients have really encountered what we've identified as a bit of a parallel process. And so these are things that have really just emerged as really just things that we've coached our clinicians to do, that we find our clinicians are coaching our clients to do, just in kind of navigating the telehealth process and in kind of working with one another in this new time and way. And a lot of these things are things that we've trained our clinicians to do, and things that we've trained our clinicians to train their clients to do. but it's creating a space for our clinicians that really allows them to be in a space to where they can put on their therapist hat or their clinician hat and really lean into that role and that identity as being a clinician, even if they are at home. Some of our clinicians have roommates, or they, again, many of our clinicians have kids at home. Many of their clients have kids at home. So how can we coach our clients and our clinicians to intentionally create a space for themselves and for their clients to where this is where therapy happens. This is when we do the good work. Another is, and this has been a technique and a strategy that we've taught pretty heavily across the enterprise. And it's a thing we call priming, and it's this process that's pulled from, it's a technique that's pulled from an evidence-based psychotherapy called dialectical behavior therapy that was designed to work with clients that are traditionally very, very hard to engage in treatment and can be very treatment resistant and can be hard to retain in treatment. But it's this process called a caring confrontation. It's this process of kind of calling out the elephant in the room. And it's a space to where we coach the clinicians to tell the client, look, this is obviously very different from you. This is obviously very different from me. They don't feel quite as smooth as they used to when you and I were working together. Help me figure out how I can make this process work for us. Let's collaboratively come up with a plan or a way to make sure that you're still getting what you need during our time together, so that I can know what it is that I need to do differently. So it's a way for the clinician to kind of inflate their own fallibility, but consult to the client, collaborate with the client as an equal in kind of acknowledging that we're all in this place that we don't really know what we're doing, or we're at least learning as we go. So let's kind of do that together. And another core thing that we've really leaned into is cultural competency, especially now that all of our clinicians are seeing their clients often within the home. We're seeing another side of our clients that we might not have seen before. And so having a very keen sense and awareness of cultural nuance and needs that a client might have based on their cultural identity is a thing that we've really leaned into. You can go to the next slide, Rebecca. So one of the things, I won't read this to you all, but this is a quote from Irvin Yalom. He is a preeminent psychiatrist and psychotherapist. He wrote a fantastic book. It's called The Gift of Therapy. Totally changed my life. And he really promotes this notion that we as clinicians and as a healthcare system, we are fallible. And the way that we move through that is to create some openness to it. Again, our mantra is we are doing the best we can with what we have. And as we build out these trainings and these resources and this advocacy work, we're getting more and more every day. We're increasing our toolkit. We're increasing our options and our resources. However, being able to be open and transparent with ourselves, with our staff, with our clients, that we're figuring this out as we go. We're all kind of in this, and we might not be in the same boat, but we're in the same storm, is a thing that our staff have really resonated with, and we found our clinicians, our clients have resonated with as well. Go to the next slide, Rebecca. So just a couple of things that we've really kind of coached our clinicians to do during this space is to leverage the alliance. When I say the alliance, that means the therapeutic alliance. So it's that relationship between our clients and the clinicians. There's a body of literature, it's called Common Factors, and what it says is that when we look across evidence-based psychotherapies, that one thing sticks out regardless of what evidence-based strategy you're using, whether it's cognitive behavior therapy, solution-focused therapy, problem-solving therapy, that the alliance, that relationship between client and therapist is the thing that is most predictive of positive outcome. So encouraging our clinicians to trust that alliance that they built with their clients, and that can kind of weather the storm of the translation and the transition to telehealth has been one of the pieces of coaching that we've offered. Another is to meet the client where they are. Again, our clients are going through this just as we are. We might have, one of my clients might have a kid on their lap while we're doing session, and that just might have to be where we live today. And so really just embracing that flexibility. And finally, there have been some really interesting and creative things that our clinicians have been able to do and bring to us as strategies for kind of enlivening the process using Zoom and using these teleconferencing software platforms, like being able to open a YouTube video and take a client on a tour through Rome, for example, while we are talking about depression symptoms in our automatic thought record, for example, if we were doing cognitive behavior therapy. And so just getting creative with the technology and using kind of what we have are things that we've coached our clinicians to do over the past couple weeks. Go to the next slide. And I just really quickly, some of the barriers we've bumped up against is that our clients might not perceive these to be a real session because they're not in the clinic with us. And what we've kind of coached our clinicians to do is roll with that resistance, identify and just lean into that, it is really different. And how can we still do the work? How can we, you can show me if you've had trouble sleeping, show me your bedroom, show me what that's like, and we can maybe rearrange it a little bit to help you sleep better. Another are distractions. This is a thing that I think we've all bumped up against. My dog's in the background probably doing something weird. My cat's in a shoebox back there doing obviously probably something weird too. But creating structure where we might not have used structure as much in previous sessions or in our previous work, but maybe kind of holding ourselves a little bit more accountable to hold more structure in our sessions and our work days than we might have before. And finally, technology. Some of our clients and our clinicians aren't as comfortable with technology as others. And so creating space and time to make sure that they have the technology resources that they need, as well as just creating some time for coaching and teaching our clients how to use technology, have been some successful strategies for overcoming that barrier. Next slide. One of the other things that we've noticed that we've heard from our clinicians as a very key and important thing for their own wellness is establishing and maintaining boundaries. Again, our clinicians are in their own homes delivering care to their clients. And so making a point to discuss with clients as well as their supervisors about how to keep themselves well and to create workspaces that do allow them to, well, even if they are in their own home, I'm at work, and when I'm not in that space, I'm at home. And so we can kind of prevent those things that we know about, like vicarious trauma or burnout or moral injury, from kind of those blurred lines between our work and home life. But having a clear space where we're at work and then another when I'm not at that space, I'm at home, truly kind of as a means for self-protection and self-care is one of the other strategies we've coached our clinicians on. Next slide. You can go to the next slide, Rebecca. And that is it.
So we have some questions from our audience. First of all, thank you so much for sharing this content, because it is something that all of us are able to learn from, and we feel like we're alone when we are here in our homes. Maybe we just have a spouse or a few family members, or maybe we are living alone. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And so being able to realize that we all are going through similar circumstances at different levels is something that we can find comfort in. Are there any positives you've noticed in the mental health space during this time?
I think so. So one of the things that we found that has been absolutely unprecedented is, one, just how quickly we've been able to overcome some of the red tape and bureaucratic barriers to like healthcare accessibility that we've never been able to before. So for example, in a matter of 2 weeks, we were able to get new milieus or new like telehealth, for example, and new kind of billing codes approved and essentially ready to be reimbursed in ways that we never had before. And so we were able to access a lot more people and offer a more diverse array of services over the past couple of weeks and more progress was made in 2 weeks on that front than we've been able to make in 5 years Becky, I know that David Guth has spoken to that a little bit. He's the CEO of all of Centerstone. I'm wondering if you've heard anything similar to that in your conversations as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a beta test that we prayed for about a decade or two, because, the only way we were reimbursed for service was to see a person in person. A little bit of telehealth was allowed, but it was very payer specific, and the patient still had to be in a licensed facility. So that was really more designed for rural. So I think it is one of the big wins, that we're getting to beta test how televideo can be engaging more so than in person, and even telephone. We can be paid now for reimbursed for telephone calls. So I think once this shakes out, there'll be a lot of examining what worked and what didn't work. My suspicion is we will not go back to just everything has to be in person. So I think that is one of the big wins. And I also think people are maybe in some ways more connected than they were prior to this, because we're having to do it and be mindful to do it more than just getting up and turning and burning and grinding every day. So, any disaster usually has a gold nugget or two, and I think we'll see that in this one too.
Are there any apps or resources that you suggest that your clients use to help, whether it's Headspace or any of those, to help just calm and help them throughout sort of the time period when they are not able to talk to you every day?
Absolutely. So so the way that, in a lot of the trainings that we've kind of offered those based on either the unique client need or the diagnosis or the evidence-based practice that the clinician is offering. So if a client is experiencing depression, for example, there are, like, cognitive behavior therapy is one of the most evidence-based treatments for depression. And so there are several apps and like online games and YouTube videos that are targeted specifically for explaining CBT, or adding, for example, the automatic thought record is a technique within CBT. There are apps that allow the client to navigate their automatic thought record on their phone or on their iPad. And so we've offered or recommended several different apps and strategies based on the client specific needs. So for anxiety, for example, Headspace is a brilliant app. Calm is another app that is fantastic for anxiety disorders. One of the others, or some of the others. So we, like Becky said, she and I have been working together for a long time in suicide prevention, and there are several suicide specific apps in regard to safety planning. There are some really fantastic apps that are rooted in dialectical behavior therapy, which is an evidence-based practice for suicidal ideation and just extreme emotion dysregulation and self-harm. There are some fantastic DBT apps. And there are several, they're kind of like YouTube channels that have either walkthroughs that have got some psychoeducation components, or some guided relaxation or guided meditations that we've also recommended for our clinicians. But if that's a thing that you guys would be interested in, we can compile some of those resources, put them in a one-pager, and send those over to you.
That'd be great.
Yep.
So someone asked, they feel stir crazy and wanted to get out of the house in sort of the first few weeks, and now they receive anxiety or feel anxiety when they think about leaving the house or going to a store, getting groceries. So how do you sort of navigate that?
I'll let you take that one, Becky. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think that is the most helpful for individuals is to just have knowledge and to be educated about, what is the safest way to do that? Is it, are we in a place where, you need to wear a mask? Yes, that's probably a great thing to do. Don't, use a gas pump handle unless you, use a paper towel or gloves. Yes, that's a good thing to do. Stores have, for the most part, the ones I've been to, have one way down the thing. So I think being educated about how to be safe while you're out is probably the beginning of how to do that. And then, as Bree said, there's lots of information out there just about how to um, calm yourself in real time if your anxiety starts to bubble up. Where, and a lot of those are, deep breathing and things like that, and being mindful. So that's my thoughts, being educated, and then using some of the techniques that we know in general anxiety, around breathing, and things like that are what I would recommend. And then I think if it becomes, to a point where the person feels so uncomfortable about it, and the anxiety becomes paralyzing and you can't do the things you need to do because of it, then for sure I would reach out. It's, super treatable if somebody's having anxiety to the level that they can't function and get the things done that they need to get done. But it's spooky out there right now. I mean, you walk into a grocery and maybe 60%, 70% of people have a mask on and the others don't. And I see people now, if you have who would have thought wearing a mask wouldn't feel awkward and weird? But now, I see people that don't have masks on and everybody's kind of giving them the stink eye. Like, why ain't you got a mask on? That's what I see when I've gone out, and I haven't gone out a lot, but just go out to get the stuff you need. Bree, anything to add? But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add, that I've coached myself on, and friends and family for sure, is to kind of allow ourselves to take news breaks. My family has had the news on TV streaming pretty much 24/7, and to turn it off for a little bit sometimes, again, because sometimes just seeing the numbers increase, or to see those percentages go up, and to see that we want to stay informed. So the knowledge is absolutely important, and being mindful of the fact that the CDC, great resource, the World Health Organization, great resource, and just being mindful of some of the sensationalism that might be present in the media, and just being a mindful consumer and an intentional consumer, a purposeful consumer of information, has been a value for me. So I have to remind myself to, if I find myself reading the news too many times a day, I'll set a limit for myself. Like, I'll only open the news once a day just to check in for anything major, for any major updates, because it can be really anxiety inducing. And again, there's just some, there's alarmism, and I think some of that is to be expected and is perfectly rational at the same time. There's only so much of this that we can know at any one given time. And so just being mindful of what we're consuming, where we're consuming it, and just the amount, how much information we really need.
And I will tell you, I mean, there are things in the news that I know and Bree knows, especially related to mental health, that are not true.
Yep.
I mean, just are, and these are reputable, very large. I mean, I screenshotted something the other night and sent it to a colleague of mine in New York. It was talking about how the crisis call center numbers had gone up 900%. That is not true. It's not. Actually, the call volume has not gone up nationally around call centers. So I also think you have to take some of that with a grain of salt. And if you don't know, you don't know. But there's lots of stuff out there that is simply not true.
Yeah, I think some of my better days working from home, and I know, I believe Becky was talking about this before, but we are so blessed that we are still able to have a job. We're receiving paychecks. We're able to still help people. But I know the days for me where I didn't feel as much anxiety were the days that I was not watching the news, or even during my lunch break, because you would have these long press conferences, both from the White House, but then you'd have state and local levels. So you'd watch 2 or 3 and you're getting conflicting information, and you're getting just politics thrown at it. And it gets very scary to where I noticed my better days were the ones where I limited that. So I think that's a great tip. Well, I want to be cognitive of everyone's time. Rebecca, would you like to tell us where we can learn more about Centerstone, maybe where we can follow the conversation and receive some resources and reach out if we feel like we can benefit from y'all's services?
Yeah, can you hear? Okay. Yeah, so you can find everything on centerstone.org. We also have a unified phone line. So if you or a colleague or a loved one need to talk to someone, we have our phone number on centerstone.org. It's right on the banner. And if you call that, they'll direct you to the resource that you need, wherever it is. And if you're not in Tennessee, if you're in a different state, that's okay. Still call us. We can help connect you. But yeah, and also I think, so I'm with the Centerstone Foundation, and so I have to add that tomorrow starts the big payback in Nashville. Today is Giving Tuesday now. So all of the nonprofit organizations, which Centerstone is a nonprofit, we're all really working overtime to help people in need. And so if you're obligated or you feel like you can give back at this time, we would love to have support that way, because, we're still seeing people in person, because we do have to see those high risk clients face to face, or people who are on medication. So we're purchasing, just like the hospitals, PPE, we're having to disinfect everything. And then, like they said, we've made huge strides in telehealth, but that still doesn't fill the whole gap. So we're taking on some costs we weren't expecting. And then we know that this isn't the end of it. So we're kind of moving in that direction to take lots of things to telehealth, and that does cost us extra money. So that's just my little spiel about the foundation, because we have started the Changing Lives Together Fund. And that is also on centerstone.org if you feel like you want to give back to us or you just want more information.
That's great. Thank you so much. And City Current, we're huge fans of Centerstone and so appreciative of everything that you do. We've been in your space and we've collaborated on some events, and we just think that the work that you all are doing is just extraordinary for behavioral health and for our community. And we want to thank you all as well. So thank you for joining us. And we look forward to connecting with you all and hopefully seeing you all in person very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Take care.